Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to tell you all about how to find the best sensitivity for you, what you need to do in-game, and some mindsets that you need to have when approaching your sensitivity. There is no perfect sensitivity. There's only a perfect sensitivity for you. Everyone is different, and the only way you're going to find your ideal sensitivity is by experimenting and by playing the game. Just copying other people's settings will not get you where you need to be. If you do find this video helpful or informative, please do remember to give it a like and subscribe if you would like to see more, as I do post Fortnite content very regularly. The first thing I want to talk about is where to start. Lots of players copy another player's sensitivity, and there's nothing wrong with that if they copy that sensitivity as a starting point and then adjust from there. If you copy some player's sensitivity and it just really isn't working for you, and you try to force yourself to use that sensitivity, you're really going to be hurting yourself in the long run. But if you pick that sensitivity, you copy it, whatever, and then you play around with it and you adjust it and change it in the ways to make it more fine-tuned to you, that's fine. If you don't want to copy someone's settings, I would say a decent starting point for your sensitivity on Legacy would be 0.650, between that and 0.850. And then if you're playing on the new settings, I would say between 40% and 60%. And while you can go higher than these, that's not like the end of the world. This is just like a decent starting point where I think most players will fit in between somewhere in that range. Like I said, on Legacy, 0.650 to 0.850, and then typically between 40 and 60% on the new settings. So I would recommend either copying someone's sensitivity with the idea of adjusting it, or starting somewhere in those ranges and then adjusting from there. Like I said, you're trying to find your sensitivity, not some other players. Just because something works for them doesn't mean it will work for you. And you can go higher or lower than those numbers. I just feel like most players will be somewhere within that range. So that's basically how it goes. Lots of players feel like they need to use a high sense because of how Fortnite was in the past. Having a higher sensitivity typically meant you could build or edit faster than other players. But since we have build and edit sensitivity, I would say the main thing you want to focus on with your base sensitivity, that just basic X and Y, is your hipfire shots, mainly your shotgun, but also your SMG like tracking. You want to be able to be consistent with your shotgun shots on your sensitivity. That's the most important thing because everything else has a multiplier. Build has a multiplier, edit has a multiplier, and even your ADS has its own sensitivity. So you just want to focus on your hipfire with this base sensitivity. If you can hit shotgun shots consistently, if you can hit flicks consistently, if you can track well with your SMG hipfire, then it's likely a good sense for you. If your building is lackluster on it, that's fine because you could just turn your build sense up. So X and Y is for your hipfire, and that's what you mainly want to focus on, your shotgun shots. And then your ADS sensitivity is mainly for your assault rifles. Even SMGs you can ADS with sometimes, or shotguns, especially if you're on Legacy. But most of the time you're going to want to hipfire shotguns and you're going to want to hipfire SMGs. Maybe give it a brief tap of LT if you are on Legacy. Your ADS sense is mainly going to be for ARs. So whatever helps you with like mid to long range is what you want to do with your ADS sense. This is typically pretty low and it's going to vary from player to player. But just when it comes to your ADS, practice medium range AR shots. I can even have an aim training map code on screen or in the description that can help you practice your AR shots. But just that's what the ADS sense is for your AR shots. And then your normal sensitivity is for your hipfire, shotgun, and SMG shots. When you're changing these settings and like trying to find out what works for you, I would recommend like playing creative, something like zone wars or box fights if you have friends, or even just 1v1ing one of your friends if you have like one player that you're able to play with. These modes allow you to like get in fights way more frequently than you would in traditional battle royale, and it's typically a less stressful environment than a BR match would be. And like I said, you get in more frequent fights. You can have an AR, a shotgun, SMG every single time you play zone wars, and you can actually practice using those weapons. Whereas if you play BR and you hot drop, you might get like a pistol only or a sniper only. And if you have like lackluster loot and you have to fight someone who has better stuff, it can be really hard to gauge whether or not it's your sensitivity. So I'd recommend playing creative, stress-free. You can get in a lot of fights quickly and actually practice your sensitivity and try to find out what works for you. I'd recommend using replay mode, or maybe even just recording some clips on your console, whatever you can do. Record some fights after you've played a while. Like let's say you've put in like 20-30 minutes on the sensitivity, you're feeling somewhat comfortable with it. Record some clips and then watch your fights back. Don't just record good clips, just watch back your fights. And when you miss shots, try to look at why you missed. If you're overshooting, like you're constantly leading more than you would like, then maybe you need to turn the sensitivity down a bit. If you're undershooting, maybe you need to turn it up a bit. It's hard to say unless you watch your clips back and actually get like a fresh feel for the fight, because in the moment it can be tough to actually realize what lost you the fight. So find out what kind of feels good for you, play around with it, adjust accordingly, and then once you get something that you're pretty comfortable with, record some clips and then watch it to see if there's anything else that you can like fine tune. If you're consistently overleading, for example, you might need to put it down a little bit, but it's really about consistency. If something happens one time, it's not the biggest deal, but if you're missing several shots for the same reason, then fixing that reason will get you a lot more hits in the future and you'll be more accurate with the sensitivity. So play creative, play aim maps, whatever you got to do. I'll have some codes in the description for aim maps, and just play a lot. I would recommend only changing your sensitivity if you have like a decent amount of time to play. If you only have like 10 minutes to play for the day, it's probably not worth changing. Whereas like the next day you might have a few hours and then you can actually fine tune and get acclimated with a new sensitivity. As far as your build and edit mode multipliers go, I would recommend going as high as you can while still being consistent with your builds. Or your edits, whatever you're doing. If you currently play on 1.4 build, for example, if you just jump to like 2.3, this will likely be very hard for you to jump to. Even if 2.3 might be a good ending point for you, you want to increase it incrementally, because building especially, but even editing, it's all about timing. And if you make like a large adjustment at once, I feel like it's going to take you a lot longer to get used to it. So I would just recommend incrementally increasing your build and edit senses as you go. This can be hard to do at first. Hopefully you already have like a decent edit and build sensitivity. But if you haven't been using this at all, it's going to be rough to get used to at first, because your normal sensitivity kind of relies on the build and edit sense to be good. Like you can get away with a lower X and Y because of build and edit sensitivity. So hopefully you're somewhat comfortable with these, but I would recommend increasing them incrementally as you go. Even if you do have a somewhat lower sense now and you know in the long run you'll get more adjusted to these higher build and edit senses, and maybe you can make use of it that way. But it can be rough if you're not used to these at all and you already play on a low sense. When it comes to practicing builds or edits, I would recommend Raiders Edit Practice Map number 2. Once again, the code will be linked down in the description below. And just practice your edits in there. There's like pretty much every single edit that you could imagine. So that's where you can get used to your edit sensitivity and find out which works for you and build muscle memory on a new edit sense. If you do want to like go several units up in one day, it'll likely be much easier to do it in creative. And then when it comes to building, practice whatever technique you want to do with building, 90s, side jumps, whatever retakes you do. Just 1v1s can also be really good for practicing your building, because then you're actually building in response to someone else. Whereas like if you're just free building, then there's not really too much you can do. Like in a 1v1, you're constantly presented with unique situations that you have to respond to in the moment. So that's what's really going to test your muscle memory and force you to like get used to a sensitivity. So I would recommend 1v1ing for getting used to building. Zone wars can also be good, but 1v1ing, if you don't have anyone to play with, cranking 90s and doing free build stuff can help you too. But I just feel like it doesn't force you to have good muscle memory as much as reacting to something in the moment will do. So those are going to be the key points for this video. I gave you a range that I think is a decent point to start at, or you can just copy someone's sensitivity. The main thing you want to keep in mind is that you're going to fine tune this to your own liking. If it works perfectly for you, that's dope. You have a lot easier time, but odds are you're going to have to fine tune it to your liking. So be prepared to practice in creative with zone wars, box fights, or 1v1s, and then adjust your aim accordingly when you watch back clips and notice how you're missing shots. And don't be too concerned with going a little bit lower on X and Y, because you have that build and edit sense to make up for it. You mainly want to balance your X and Y around your hip fire, like I said before. And that's basically it, guys. It just takes a lot of practice to get used to a sensitivity and a lot of willingness to change. I feel like a lot of people, at least from streaming and reading comments, it seems like a lot of people try to force themselves to like a specific sensitivity or a specific type of sensitivity. Like they really want to have a really high sensitivity. And even if it's detrimental to them and they're not that good with it, they just try to force themselves to get used to it. You want to try to find what feels right to you and get used to that. That way you can just be as consistent as possible in game. So I hope you guys found this video helpful or informative. If you did, please do remember to give it a like. Subscribe if you would like to see more. Comment down below if it helped you and what you thought of the video. And I'll see you guys another time. Thanks for watching.
1v1.
Right? I thought he was in that box with me when I went down him. Whatever, it worked out in the end because he led me to his teammate. I'd assume this other guy's just playing low somewhere. And I have medkits to win the heal off if it goes to that. I would rather it didn't though. Where the fuck is this kid?
Right there. Saw him all the way snow. I think right there, but directly below.
Alright.
You see him under that? Nice. Shit. GG.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we got all those kids so easy. That's why that was easy to win.
Yeah, I pumped like so many for 150.
They just
all
kept
of them.
getting away, yeah. I'll play with viewers until I switch to PC.
Barney.
Sammy walks around his house like a fucking chicken.
It's a big crab, bro.
But no, when